So there's been a huge publicity blitz around this Beatles documentary. Get Back has been pushed throughout all of the social media channels. I'm sure you guys are inundated with commercials or advertising popping up in your feed, little clips of the documentary to help entice people to take a look and perhaps, spend that dollar to watch it. I have to admit, I kind of had the impression that we were going to be duped into watching and paying for something that we've all seen before. We've seen the clips, we've seen the concert on the roof, so, why should I spend my time and money to watch this? Well, I have to say, after spending the 7+ hours watching the documentary, I've come away with a totally different perspective that I want to share with you right after this. Today I want to talk about the Beatles documentary Get Back. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of buzz, a lot of media hype around this documentary, and I wanted to give you guys my opinion. Now, full disclosure, I'm a big Beatles fan. So for me, this documentary was really something special. It does a wonderful job of shedding light on some aspects of the end portion of the Beatles' careers that we might not have been fully aware of. The human frailty, as well as the brilliance behind the members of the Beatles. And I think it does that extremely well. Now, one of the first albums I ever purchased as a kid with my own money was the Beatles compilation album, the blue one, which was later followed by the red one. And I remember playing those albums over and over again. The sleeves of the albums had all of the lyrics of the songs written on them, and I would sing along with them. And I remember playing my tennis racket in my basement with a couple of friends even that I convinced to play along with me, and I just pretended I was playing with the Beatles because the music had that effect on me, and it really managed to cheer me up in times where I was down, and it really had that positive effect on me, and it just made me feel better. So for me, the Beatles had a very big impact on me as a very young adult. Now, I gotta say, I'm pretty emotional after watching the documentary. It really brought out the aspect of what a phenomenon the Beatles really were. I mean, they came out at the right time, with the right combination of musicians, and created the right kind of music for, a lot of people to really love and connect with. And one of the things that really blew my mind was the quality of the audio and the video in the documentary. I mean, till now, all I've ever seen were, grainy black and white footage, little clips here and there, but nothing that was really like outstanding. I mean, I have to say the video was really outstanding. It looked like it was filmed yesterday. And at times I had to remind myself that I was looking at something that was filmed almost, half a century ago. So being able to watch the magic of how these musicians created some of these beautiful songs, some of the most timeless songs, out of thin air, it seemed, they just started the process, and before you know it, the seeds of certain songs that we all admire and love so much started to develop, and it was something that kept me glued to the screen. I just love watching that creative process. And being able to watch the process develop also made me better appreciate all of the individual members' contributions to these songs. Each one of the members of the band had their own unique style, their own unique approach, sense of humor. You get to see, what the elements were that really shaped the character of each song. It's great to watch them work together. It's great to see them, joking around, playing around in the studio, being able to bounce ideas off one another and just play together until something happened. And then when that something did happen, it was almost like a force that you couldn't stop. So Paul would introduce a little lick, John would play off of that lick, they would create the beginnings of some of the lyrics that would ultimately turn into some great songs. Now, along with some of the great takes, the documentary also has a lot of footage of stuff that never actually made it on an album. There was a lot of practice. There was a lot of ideas being bounced back and forth that some of them, let's face it, were not as good and ultimately didn't make the cut. But as a Beatles fan, seeing all of this footage is almost like water to somebody that's been in the desert for the last 30 years. It's just every single second of video that we can see of the process, to me, is something magical. Now, it was really cool for me to see that when Billy Preston actually was brought in to play keyboards, things changed. To that point, it seemed like they were missing a very important element. And if you listen to that album, you really do appreciate the little nuances that he threw in that really helped the songs become what they ultimately would be. To me, it was very interesting to see just how hard they worked. It seemed at certain points they were physically exhausted. You can see Ringo kind of falling asleep on the chair at times, exhaustion in the eyes of Paul McCartney and stuff like that. That shows just how hard these musicians worked. And it's not coincidence that they came out with such great music and so much of it in such a short period of time. Now, if you look back at the history, they weren't producing music for very long, but during those years that they were actually producing music, they came out with so many great songs. Obviously, they had to put in the time and effort to be able to create those tunes, and we can see from this documentary just how hard they actually applied themselves when it came time to creating this music. Now, I know some of you were looking at this documentary with the idea that you would see the ultimate cracks being shown in the foundation of the Beatles caused by Yoko's presence. Now, I didn't get that feeling at all from this documentary, and for me, Yoko was always present, she was always there, but I didn't see any signs of her spurring any kind of controversy or starting any kind of arguments. So I kind of gained a little bit more respect for Paul when he was talking about Yoko when she wasn't present and John wasn't there as well, because he didn't talk badly about her at all. He basically expressed the fact that he totally understood that, they just wanted to be together. Yoko and John loved each other and they always wanted to be together. And who was he to stand between that? John would ultimately choose Yoko over the Beatles. So what's the point? So that respect for one another made me really appreciate the respect and the regard that each member had in the band for one another. Now, it goes without saying that the rooftop concert that they played towards the end of the documentary was by far the highlight of the entire movie. And I really watched that performance with different eyes for the first time, because I hadn't realized what went into preparing for that performance. I didn't know that they were trying to create a bunch of songs within a very short period of time for that performance, because I've always seen that performance or that clip being played alone, and I didn't really understand what went into it. Now, in light of this documentary, I could really watch that performance with a totally different perspective. Not only a sense of amazement that they were able to pull it off, to me gives me a little bit of a sad feeling, knowing that they kind of at that point knew that it was the end. It would be their last public performance. It's really a shame that it had to happen that way, but at the same time, I think everyone is okay with that. I think everyone felt that at that point, the Beatles did what they needed to do up to that point, and going any further would maybe have been a mistake. Could the documentary have been shorter? I think it could have. You could probably have easily chopped off 3 hours of, banter back and forth, jokes, them playing around in the studio and really focused more on the creative process. But I think the reason that was left in is because they wanted to give you a better understanding of who they were, even through all of the hard work and challenges and stress that they may have been feeling during that time. You can tell that when they were playing, they were having a good time. Now, one thing that I found really interesting about this documentary is just how much Paul McCartney seems to be the leader of the band in this scenario. Now, we've always thought that the leader of the Beatles was John, and as a matter of fact, in a portion of the video where they have a conversation, John and Paul have a conversation that was secretly mic'd, you can hear Paul McCartney tell John that he always felt that he was the leader of the band. But if you look at how things evolve throughout the video, that definitely is not the feeling I got. I got the feeling that Paul was basically calling the shots and giving most of the direction in the songs, while John was a little bit more aloof. Let's just say not as focused. I got the sense that not much would have happened without Paul's dedication and persistence, and maybe we can say a little bit of heavy-handedness towards the other members of the band when creating these songs. It's obvious to me that without that, not much probably would have happened. George Harrison, for example, seems to be quite content doing his thing quietly on the side, every once in a while interjecting his point of view, which often seems to be shut down by Paul McCartney and sometimes also John. I can see his frustration from time to time pop up in the video as well. Now, Ringo, throughout the entire thing, seems very tired. Most of the time he's trying to stay awake, which is funny to me, but I could understand why. He seems to still be very reliable. He's always there. He's always paying attention. He's always playing when it's time to play. And he's always playing very well. I mean, in the Ringo style, he has that utilitarian drumming that really is the heartbeat of the Beatles songs. The magic really happens between John and Paul. You can see that their connection, although very different, really sparks the creative juices. Paul was always the positive one. John was always more of a negative one, a little bit more sarcastic, almost like the yin and yang of music. But it's undeniable to me that once they start the process, you can see just how the magic happens, like two elements creating a spark or fire. They just throw ideas off each other and it just snowballs. It just becomes something out of nothing, which is really magical to me. And again, all of this in just a matter of weeks. Throwing together an album, a performance, learning new material, and starting from scratch in just a matter of weeks is a very difficult, stressful process in itself. And just being able to pull that off speaks volumes in terms of their creative ability. Some of the timeless moments within the documentary are just when you see Paul, just strumming away at the bass or a guitar or at the piano, just trying to figure out a few licks here and there. And all of a sudden you hear the beginnings of what you know will ultimately be an all-time classic. If you listen carefully, you can see just the beginning aspects of Get Back starting to pop out of thin air, and you see all the chaos around them. People talking, people joking, people smoking, people just reading newspapers. And there he is just like trying to create something in all of this chaos that ultimately becomes Get Back. It's amazing to me that that even happened in the middle of all this chaos. It could have easily have gone sideways if somebody just interrupted, or somebody says, hey, let's break for lunch. Some great songs like that might have never seen the light of day. So for the people thinking that Yoko really spearheaded the breakup, we know for a fact that's not true. Paul McCartney himself on Howard Stern said that when asked who broke up the Beatles, he said, well, I know who broke up the Beatles. It was me. So he admitted himself that he was the one that spearheaded, I guess, the breakup at that time. And even though there was a lot of rumors and people love to hate Yoko, I understand that. but it's not justified. And, you know, after all these years, I think it has come to light that that was not the case. But still, with all of that, with all of the crazy stuff happening around them at the time, they still managed to pull together, create a fantastic album with great tracks on it. And remember, guys, they were doing this with an 8-track reel-to-reel type configuration. There was no digital multi-track anything at that time. As a matter of fact, you can clearly see George Harrison sort of donating his 8-track recording system, which was huge, had to be basically carried in from a truck with a bunch of people. That was what they were using at the time. It really showcases the brilliance of all of the musicians, how they worked together to create another last masterpiece that they would be remembered by forever, with great songs, Long and Winding Road, Get Back, Dig a Pony, the list goes on and on. Amazing tunes, amazing tracks. I would say that they were geniuses when put together. The formula was right. But at the same time, you can see from this documentary that 90% of it was dedication and really hard work. Yeah, you do have to have talent, but at the same time, they were there to work, and you can see that that's exactly what they did. Now, as mentioned in the documentary, the mix was done by Phil Spector, Mr. Wall of Sound himself, and to many people, that mix is not considered one of the best. And in my opinion, I have to agree. It is classic because it will always be timeless, because that is the original mix, the original recording. But if you want to hear a slightly different version of that, a more modern version take on that particular recording, you can listen to Naked, which is something that was remastered later on, many years after that. I think Paul McCartney had a big influence on that. You can see that there's a lot more clarity, a lot less muddiness in the mix. The sound separation seems to be better. The balance between instruments seems to be better, and overall it's a much clearer recording to me, and I think it's a much better recording in my opinion. I like the original a lot, but I do think that the elements that were introduced later with better technology and maybe better equipment overall sounds better to me. So I highly encourage any Beatles fan to watch the documentary. It's well worth the time that you need to invest. It is a lot of time, but I do think you'll come away with a better appreciation for the music and the artists and just the history behind the Beatles. For me, it's really opened up my eyes and really given me a fresh appreciation for the band, for the music, for the artists that I never had before. Hey, I'd really love to hear your opinion on this documentary if you've watched it already, and perhaps you're a Beatles fan. I'd love to hear your point of view. Has this changed your opinion? Has it given you a new appreciation for the Beatles? Perhaps you're not even a Beatles fan. Maybe this documentary converted you over. Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. And of course, as always, if you appreciate the content that we're putting together for you on this channel, please consider subscribing. It's why we do what we do. Take care, guys. See you soon.